Yesterday, CNN's Brian Stelter invited former Enron executive and New York Times columnist Paul Krugman on reliable sources. Here's what he had to say to Americans concerned about a recession.
Can we dispense with the recession debate real quick? Are we in a recession, and does the term matter?
No, we aren't, and no, it doesn't. I mean,
one sentence. That was it, huh?
Yeah, that was it. It's none of the usual criteria that real experts use says that we're in a recession right now. And what does matter? The state of the economy is what it is. Jobs are abundant, although maybe the job market is weakening. Inflation is high, though maybe inflation is coming down. What does it matter whether you use the R word or not?
Yeah, there are two aspects of that really bug me, and I know we've been talking about this kind of recession definition for a while. And fine, sure, it is just a term. It doesn't change. The character of the economy is what the character of the economy is, regardless of what you call it. But he said two things. He said, well, real experts know that it couldn't be further from a recession if you tried to be not in a recession. And then he said, what difference does it make in this very kind of dismissive cadence of a regime supporter, right? Of someone who is clearly one of the most partisan figures I think there is, who would, because Biden is in charge, of course he's going to describe it that way. I think we all know that if this exact same economic circumstance was unfolding with a Republican in charge, God forbid Trump, he would say, of course experts know all the criteria have been met for a recession, and it's heartless to deny that we are in the midst of a horrible recession. Am I wrong?
I mean, so I argued in my radar that, the argument of definition is tedious and that it's not a recession so much as an assault on the middle class. Nothing makes me doubt myself so much as watching a clip like that where you see those people, sort of on the same side as you, right? Because I think what you're getting at, Robby, is, there's a sort of like smug distance from the struggles of everyday Americans inherent and implied in the way that they are presenting the facts. That is the thing that rankles me and makes me think like, God, am I wrong? Because I sort of made a similar argument to these people. But the thing about pushing it always comes back to credibility. It's impossible not to imagine what you just laid out, which is that if this same scenario was unfolding under their political enemy, they would be the ones ringing the bell for recession, talking about how terrible the economy was. We know that when Trump had this amazing economy going, right, like 25% of wage earners saw a 4.5% increase in 2019, lowest historic Black and Latino unemployment rates. They couldn't bring themselves to even describe the economy. Like nobody would even cover it. So I totally agree with you. Like there's a real credibility gap, even if I too feel that the conversation about the word recession a little bit misses the point, which is the struggle for American families.
Right, and I take your point that, yes, there are a couple different ways to define the term. Right, I quoted from Phil Magnus's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal where he explains, like, yes, this is the definition that the NBER has, although previously under conditions that would not have met this definition, it was still explained as a recession. That's happened. How we talk about this, how we frame this, the experts, right, the fact checkers have some power to craft that narrative, and you cannot trust them to be objective and dispassionate. People like Paul Krugman are not objective. They are spinning a set of facts to make it more favorable to the administration. It's obvious that the administration was doing that, right, in that statement they put out, but then that gets backed up by, as I talked about on my radar, by PolitiFact, by friendly people in the mainstream media who then disseminate this message that, well, actually, it's not a recession, and look at all the good stuff going on, right? And what does it even matter? Even if, right, it is always more complicated than it seems. That by this definition, maybe not quite by this definition that many people use, certainly, and the pain people are feeling is real regardless, and they just don't have that, or they don't come across, or the administration often doesn't seem like it gets that, especially when some of the language like, well, why, if you had a Tesla, you wouldn't be paying for higher gas prices. That kind of statements we've heard from we've heard Democrats say that. Yeah, it'd be great. Everybody gets a Tesla. Great, that would be fantastic. People can't afford them. They can't find them even if they could afford them. But of course, the GOP is actually jumping on this little interview, so not missing an opportunity to lay blame for inflation squarely on the Democrats. Here's what House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy had to say over the weekend.
The Democrats have no plan to help Americans who are paying the highest prices in 40 years. They have no plan to stop workers from losing an entire month's salary because of inflation. They have no plan to bring down the high gas prices. They are still costing families more than $4 a gallon and hundreds of dollars every single year. They have no plan to rescue and secure our border or reduce crime. Democrats have no plan to help Americans, but their policies only make it worse. Our country cannot continue down this path. The American people cannot continue to bear the brunt of Democrats' failed policy.
I guess the Republican plan is just being left to the imagination, or maybe it's after that clip. The Republican plan to blame the Democrats, and so on and so forth, which is frustrating, right? Because neither side has answers or seems to have answers that are of interest to the American people. But I agree that the Democratic plan is very confusing at times because it's simultaneously we have to be aware of the climate future and hedge against that and take climate seriously and move off of fossil fuels to renewables, that kind of thing. At the same time, we're begging. We're actually like going to Saudi Arabia to beg them for more gasoline. It's a totally bipolar energy policy that this administration has, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that, 4 to 5% of the 9.1% of inflation is related to gas, obviously that is squarely at the president's feet. That is squarely in the Democrats' arena. I'm sorry, but the transition to renewables is not going to happen in time to help American families, whereas the Keystone XL pipeline might have actually made a difference towards how much we're paying at the pump. I'm very curious about what the Republican plan is to bring down the cost of, meat and chicken and grain and eggs and milk and everything else, right? I'm eagerly awaiting, Speaker McCarthy's, plan. Where is this going? It's very, very exciting to think that, the Republicans might suddenly become the party, protecting the American working class, because at least there would be one party speaking to the working class, to the middle class. But, it's very hard to imagine that the inflation that's not related to gas in America, I really feel that it's not quite fair to lay that at the Democrats' feet, because it is a global crisis, a global problem, obviously related to the war in Ukraine. And I am excited to hear what, proposals are afoot, on the other side.
Yeah, and then you might hear crickets, right, as you often do. The Republicans they're easing into the role, I guess, of being the party of the working class, as you put it, they keep saying that, and I guess they're winning working class people more so, I think, on their opposition to the sort of cultural wokeness that is so captured the commanding heights of the Democratic Party, that is very off-putting to, frankly, to just most people in general, to everyone else. So they're winning more working class people, but I'm not sure it's because the party's really taking on their issues. What is your sense of that?
So I think, we talk about this a lot. If you look at the priorities of working class Americans, of average Americans, middle class Americans, they're worried about the economy, inflation, the price of gas, and crime. And the Democrats, if you look at what their platform is and what they're speaking to, it's climate change, the war in Ukraine, LGBTQ rights, right. It's just a total and abortion, right? It's a total mismatch, right? American families are struggling to feed their children, and the Democrats are talking to them about culture war issues. It used to be the reverse, right? But there's been that total reverse controversial. So to that extent, I think, when you talk to working class people, Charles Starworth wrote about this at Newsweek very well, like they are seeing the Republicans speaking to these issues, if only because they're a useful cudgel against President Biden. There are a few very concrete proposals on the table I think it's important to point out. I mean, first of all, the CHIPS Act was totally bipartisan, but I think the energy to start competing with China at a manufacturing level was very much a Trump era point of view. I mean, that Trump really took an axe to the neoliberal consensus and said, no, actually, we're going to fight for these jobs. I'm going to fight China for them. And so I think that is very much an energy that you see more on the right than on the left right now. And that's major. I mean, that's a really big deal. I think also there's a lot of sort of family-oriented policies floating around from, Senator Rubio, from Mitt Romney, ideas about child tax credits, ways to bolster American families at the family level, incentivize and protect those families, especially, Marco Rubio came out very strongly on this front after Roe was overturned, saying, you know what, yeah, that's a good critique. How are we supporting American families if we're insisting you should have this baby? We're going to become the party that's doing that. And you really are actually seeing renewed energy for that. And then, of course, things like schooling, keeping schools open, keeping critical race theory out of schools. These are concerns for middle class families as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll be back with more Rising right after this.